I grew up in a house that was haunted by a child spirit. Being so young myself, I was very aware of it and had no concept of speculating about whether it was real or not. It was just a simple fact of reality that there was a little ghost in this house. There were knocks on the walls on the back porch. Small things would inch off of shelves and drop, innocently but definitely happened. My mother would see a small figure run down the hallway leading to her bedroom, and she'd say my name, wondering why I wasn't asleep, and then come to check on me to see me fast asleep. Orb caught frequently on disposable camera pictures, which our family was big on. Lots of disposable cameras in my childhood days. My most wowing incident was watching a Mary-Kate and Ashley VHS in my mom's room in the TV, going static and getting annoyed. My big brother and I called the ghost Larry, and I yelled at Larry to stop messing with my movie, and it worked. I remember being kinda shook that I could talk to it and it would hear me and respond. One of my earliest memories. Later on learned that my mother asked our landlord if she knew about the paranormal activity at the house, and she had confirmed that a young boy fell from the second-story window to his death. Growing up with a ghost really set my path into adulthood. I am now a very curious, spiritual, mystical individual. I have experienced a lot of very odd things in my day. When you come into this world knowing undeniably that there's much more to life than most people are, even comfortable considering, it definitely creates a fringe element of perspective and kinda leaves you wondering what else there is.
My dad bought an 1884 Victorian house with when she was pregnant with my younger sister. This was around 13 years ago. Being a history lover, my dad wanted to discover the history of the house and who built it. Turns out it was built by a judge and his wife or their family. I was 12 when we moved in, and I got to pick out my bedroom upstairs. There was one room that stood out to me as the creepiest, coldest, darkest room out of the 4 up there, and I refused to go in there. I even refused to keep the door open. It had a stagnant eeriness to it that made me sick to my stomach. Every night I would wake up at 3 a.m., and somehow the door would be partially open, just enough that a small child could fit through it. I'd shake it off as my dad was probably playing a joke on me, as he knew how much that room creeped me out. Well, at 3 a.m. one morning, I woke up, and the light to the stairway turned on. Following that, there were footsteps that came up the stairs. I didn't think much of it, as my dad probably was grabbing something out of one of the other unoccupied rooms. He's an early riser. However, the footsteps stopped, and the light was still on. Later in the morning, my dad asked me why I left the light on in the stairwell, and I said, "Why did you leave the light on in the stairwell? I heard you come upstairs." He said he didn't come upstairs, and I believed him. And while we were on the topic, I told him to stop leaving the creepy room door open. He swears he didn't, and as a dad would say, why would I open a door to a room no one is in and waste heat and money like that? Which makes sense. He has no reason to open the door. This is an old, poorly insulated house that he was renovating, and it took a lot of heat and money to keep it warm. About a year later, it was late, and I fell asleep on the couch downstairs. So I got up to go to my room. When I got to the top of the stairs, I noticed the door to the creepy room was open. Tired and annoyed at this point, I went to close it, but froze when I saw a hand on the doorframe and a little white face of a little girl. Just as quickly as I saw her, she vanished. As my dad continued to renovate the house, I guess it stirred things up because we could be sitting in the dining room, and we could hear little footsteps above us running, dancing around the creepy room that was directly above the dining room. A few years later, we discovered that the judge and his wife, who built the house, had a daughter who died in some kind of accident. She was only 9 when she died. I haven't seen her since, but to this day, I still refuse to go into that room.
From the age of 5 to 21, I lived in a house that was occupied by a few ghosts. One year, there was footsteps coming from one of the rooms that lay above the living room. This wasn't the sound of a house settling. This was actual footsteps. It was nearly every day that we would hear the footsteps. Eventually, we got used to hearing the footsteps that we heard, that we would often shout hello often to the reply of hello back. Then there was the Black Monk. This isn't the story of the Black Monk in England. Far from it, this was a different Black Monk altogether. Once, when my mother was awake during the night, she was coming up the stairs. When she saw a figure at top of the corner of the stairs were not technically in a straight line. You had to walk up a full flight to a landing, then walk up another 3 steps to the right of you walking up. She saw the figure with arms outstretched in a hooded caul. She blinked, and then the figure was gone. Another time, we began to feel a very cold spot in the hallway. It never moved from the area. No matter how hot the weather became, the cold spot remained. We got used to that as well eventually. Then when I was a teenager, I saw a Black Monk, think Benedictine monk here. The Black Monk was walking away from the back of the house. As I watched, the black monk began to turn around. In his semi-stooped way as he turned, I could see that he was straightening up. And I ran over to my bed and laid there, all the while feeling the black monk make their way from the garden to the room I was in. Then, as the black monk got into my room, the monk then placed his face right against the side of my face. I dared not open my eyes to look. I got the sensation that that wasn't the right move to make, but keeping my eyes shut was. Then I realized that at that moment, that I had in fact had my first full-bodied apparition, when all the other apparitions were just voices. Every visitor we had always complained of hearing the voice of the spirit inhabitant of the house.
My parents and I had moved out of our hometown for about a year, due to my mom's job. Shortly after we moved in, my uncle moved in with us. For context, he is my dad's half-brother with a big age difference between them, so he's closer to a brother to me than an uncle. It was his first year of college, so he was gone during the week and would come home late Friday night. When he got home, me and my parents were at the store, so he was home alone. He went upstairs to get his Xbox set up for the weekend and heard something in the attic. He had no clue what the noise was, and he thought maybe my dad had put something in there to prank him. He goes to see what it is and finds an old-school pencil sharpener, like the kind you put on the wall, and it's just spinning and spinning, as if somebody is quickly spinning the handle. He stands there for a second, and then it just stops suddenly. It doesn't slow down, it just stops. My uncle bolts out the house, just sits in his car trying to call us. When we get home, he tells my dad what happened, and my dad just kind of brushes him off. My uncle refused to be alone in the house after that. I had no idea about any of it. I guess he never told me because he didn't want to scare me, and my dad didn't believe it. Over the next year, weird stuff happens, upstairs all the time. Things were constantly unplugged from the walls. Sheets would be rumpled like someone sat on them. Curtains would move, doors would shut and lock. My mom and I are pretty sure something's up, but my dad refuses to believe in ghosts or spirits. Eventually, my uncle got his own place and moved his stuff out of the upstairs room. My dad lost his work-from-home job, and my parents got separated. When my parents reconciled, my dad had gotten a new job, and we'd have to move again. It was one of the last nights living at the house before we sold it. And for some reason, my dad slept in the room upstairs, while my mom was working a night shift. He got up super early every morning to commute an hour to his new job. It was still dark out when he went downstairs to get breakfast, and he sees a white, glowing mist at the foot of the stairs. He said it was kind of a vague shape, but it was as if someone was about to climb onto the first step, hand on the railing and all. He went stock still and suddenly felt freezing cold in the middle of July in Tennessee, so much so he could see his breath. Now remember, my dad has categorically denied anything paranormal this whole time living in this house. He said he'd never felt so scared in his life, and I guess his fight or flight finally kicked in, and he said out loud, "All right, I believe you, now go away," and it just disappeared. As far as I know, nobody experienced anything after that.
My mother-in-law had 7 grandsons. She did a lot of craft needlework and made a lovely embroidered panel for each one of her grandsons of his name. My youngest son, Stevie, was the 7th grandson, and he was only 2 months old when she suddenly passed of a heart attack. We had never received a name panel from her for Stevie, and I never discussed it with her. I simply assumed that she hadn't gotten around to doing one before she passed. Well, on the night of the day she died, I dreamed of her. She was standing in a place that was very dark, and she didn't speak to me but was holding a name panel she had made in one hand and kept gesturing toward it with the other hand, as if to say, "Look at this." I asked her, "Mom, what are you trying to tell me?" But she shook her head and kept her mouth closed, as if she were not permitted to speak to me, and just repeatedly kept gesturing to the name panel. A few days later, as I was beginning the process of cleaning out her home, I discovered a bag in the top of her bedroom closet. Inside the bag was a name panel that she had embroidered with Stevie's name. This was the same panel that she had been showing me in the dream. It was in the bag because she hadn't gotten around to giving it to us yet.
It's not a ghost, but I had a premonition about someone's death. I dreamt that I was at an open casket funeral, but I couldn't get close enough to see who was in it. I could see it was a man, but every time I tried to look at his face, I couldn't do it. I heard from someone that he was killed in a motorcycle accident. The dream cuts to a freshly dug grave where the casket was, and there was a photo of a dark brown hair man in his mid-20s wearing a black suit. In the dream, I thought this man was an ex-boyfriend that used to own a motorcycle. But it was weird because I couldn't quite confirm it was him in this photo. A couple of months go by, and the son of my parents' friends died in a motorcycle accident. I didn't know him. And as it was the early 2000s, I hadn't seen him either. Everything happened like in the dream. I went to the funeral, got very close to the casket, but I couldn't see his face. He was buried in the same cemetery as in the dream, but it only clicked for me when I saw the picture in the mass pamphlet. It was the same man in the suit, same damn picture and all. I almost fainted. It was weird AF.